Little B, as he is known back then, had a normal, somewhat privileged early life. Life changed, however, on February 9, 1964, when, for the world of music, the British invasion with the Beatles came onto the scene. But this really had little effect on young BB, as it were. In the summer of 1965, Little B got to choose a band instrument in school, and this is when Bob's musical career really started to form. During the summer of 1965, two very larger-than-life characters appeared on TV. Trumpeter Herb Alpert from California and his Tijuana Brass were everywhere on radio, TV, magazines, and trumpets were popping up all over the place. However, the one single event in Bob's life that changed everything, and I mean everything, was when New Orleans trumpeter Louis Satchmo Armstrong had his own summer replacement TV show. His massive tone, massive personality, and massive skill, both as a trumpeter and entertainer, hooked into little BB's brain. Bob got his horn in a case in grade 4 and never wondered again what he was going to do, and in most ways he did it. Double B played throughout school, college, grad school, and still to this day is active 50 years later. He became a 33-year public school veteran and a regionally somewhat famous musician, playing and singing with the Sharks, Blotto, and a series of almost forgotten bands. He even survived the disco era. With the Sharks, he played on 5 releases on Blotto Records and opened for everyone from Matt Guitar Murphy, Johnny Copeland, Tower of Power, Little Feat, Clarence Clemens, Dr. John, Gary U.S. Bonds, Marshall Crenshaw, Carolyn Mass, and the list goes on and on. In 1999, he left the Sharks to pursue a position as jazz ensemble director at RPI in Troy, New York, where he still works directing, producing, and composing for 4 unique jazz orchestras. BB left public education, retired in 2011, and has spent his retirement producing, composing, relaxing, and creating his passion project, Double B and a Drive-By Band. The Double B sound is equal parts jazz, historic New Orleans funk, second line, R&B, and soul with an immersive gospel tone. A gumbo of dance music, audience participation, and soulful vocals, an instant party. Bob has devoted himself to the music of the Crescent City on the mighty Mississippi ever since. By the way, Double B was a name bestowed on him during an audience with trumpeter Wynton Marsalis. He asked, "What do they call you?" I said Bob, and he said, "Not anymore, Double B has a much clearer ring."
Absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Oh, hello, Bob Button. Let me put my glasses on so I can see what I'm doing. Okay. Happy to have you on my show, Empire Radio Sounds. I'm glad you made some time.
Oh,
Um,
for having me.
well, this is a pleasure. I'm going to start with this first question. It's kind of a long one, but I'm going to read it right off the page here. Let me start with a question that draws on both your experience as a musician and as a teacher. How did you go about learning to play jazz and improvise as a young person? What I'm getting at is there is a jump of faith, so to speak, when learning to improvise. How did you learn to play with no written notes to lead the way? And how do you get younger players to cross that bridge?
Well, I had a kind of a unique situation in that I played my first gig when I was around, I think it was like 11 or 12 years old. My friend and I and a couple of other guys snuck up to a bowling alley in town, and there was a band on stage, and my friend goes, he plays trumpet and we have one out in the car. You ought to get him to do. And I remember doing a Chicago tune. And, that was like the first time to do that. Then, the other thing is that I was personally, I started playing the trumpet because of basically the summer replacement shows that were on around 1960. I think it was 65 or 66. Where that summer I had a chance for the first time to really experience Herb Alpert, who I just thought was about the coolest thing in the world. Al Hirt had a summer replacement show that summer, and Louis Armstrong was all over everything.
Yeah.
And so we got word back from the band director, my mother did, that I was going to play the trombone. Well, that had two problems. Number one, I wanted to play the trumpet, and number two, more importantly, is I really had a problem doing anything that anybody told me. So, maybe I would have been a trombone player. I don't know, but yeah. And then, realizing that, then I had an opportunity to just start jamming with some of the kids around my high school and stuff. And I remember that there was this one girl, probably right around the 9th or 10th grade, who knew maybe 2 chords or 3 chords on a guitar. And I realized that if I had to go ask the band teacher how I could play with the guitar, because I didn't even realize there was such a thing as transposition at the time.
Right.
And then we just started playing a little bit, and it just kept going. And I decided I wanted to do music as a career. I had no intentions whatsoever of being a teacher. I was going to be a rock star like everybody else.
Yeah.
And it worked out that I went to a teacher's school. We all went to the same college, Marcus. We'll tell everybody. We're from the College of St. Rose, and we're all a little mad right now that there's no music major or education, but that's for a different time. So that's how that came around. And I've always liked the creative side of playing in general. The opportunity to create melodies that maybe had never been created before. Maybe I'm copying. But, the expression was always fun for me. Yeah. And to get a kid to do that is hard because, it's funny. I still work at RPI. Right. And last night we had a session, and I had a kid. This kid is, understandably brilliant. And it's funny. He's like 21. I'm just thinking of this one particular saxophone player last night. And he was like, beside himself, upset that he wasn't playing to what he felt was the same level as the other guys in the line that were playing words. And the funny thing about it is it kept going around, and you could see him get better and a little bit more confident.
Yeah.
And that for me is the addiction,
I like the way you put that.
You know what I'm saying? It's what keeps me there. I mean, I've been really, really lucky in that I don't know a lot of trumpet players especially, but I don't know a lot of musicians in general who can honestly say that they've made their entire living and their entire lifetime. Now I'm retired from school, from public school, but as a musician. I mean,
Yeah,
teaching
me too.
a musician as much as playing out in clubs or concerts or wherever.
Yeah.
And I was able to make a very tidy living all through. And so for that, I'm very, very proud.
Well, and that brings me to some of my other questions further up the road here. But yeah, the whole thing of learning to improvise, for some people, it seems to be a real, like you described with your student last night, a scary thing. It's like jumping off the diving board, and like if you hit a wrong note, it's not the end of the world.
And the funny thing about it is my primary improvisation teacher was a 7-time Grammy Award-winning baritone saxophonist named Nick Brignola. And if that's not scary, preparing your homework for that guy every month or every week was tough.
Yeah,
but
I studied with Nick.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He gave you a tremendous amount, or he gave me anyway, a tremendous amount of encouragement to, he goes, you're not going to play like Miles the first time.
Right.
If you stick with it and you listen and you transcribe and you put it in your own words, you're going to be able to.
I agree. Okay, well, my next question, when I was reading through your bio, the year 1965 jumped out at me. I'm old enough to remember Herb Alpert, Louis Armstrong, Al Hirt, all these people we talked about who were part of the popular culture at the time. They had hits on the radio. They were on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Why do you think in today's world, there's not that many instrumentalists that get that big of a role in music anymore?
Oh, man. Well, I don't want to come off sounding like a bitter 65-year-old man.
I know, I just wonder because
but I personally believe, and I don't expect anyone to agree with me necessarily, is we have on one side, the commercial aspect of music, and on the other side, we have the creative and artistic side of music. Unfortunately, as all our old influences used to say, money talks and walks.
Yep.
It is, I believe right now that it is so washed out and synthesized with we've gotten to a point where really literally the influence of making cheap mass-produced recordings of things that shock you are just really taking over everything. I mean, I agree that any culture has to move on. I'm just not convinced myself that particular culture is moving on in a positive way. There's a lot, go on and on. I think you know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to come out and publicly.
I think I can put a positive spin on it, though, that as I understand, the highest paid instrumentalist, at least in the United States, is Chris Bodie, a trumpet player. So there is that.
But the thing is I was talking probably more from the perspective of mass commercial music. I mean, they get a DJ out there and guys running around basically screaming what could be very, very, very pertinent lyrics, but you really can't hear them because it's so loud, and I'm starting to sound like my grandfather now. But I mean, it's gotten to the point where it's more for shock value, and I think in the back room, it's also very cheap to make those records.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, let me switch gears here. How did the Sharks form, and what was the mission, so to speak, of that band?
Well, I like the word confluence. I mean, you and I grew up. You grew up in the Capital District too, right? I mean, once you got here, obviously.
Sort of. By the time I was in my early 20s, I was here for a while until I went into service. But,
For
yeah.
anybody watching over in Europe or whatever, we live at the confluence of the Mohawk and Hudson River.
Right.
And I mean, that's what our area is. And it's always been a shock to me that when different influences come together. And now with the Sharks, we were all banging around playing in club bands and that sort of thing. I met a guy on the first day of college that I was friends with forever until he passed a couple of years ago. His name was Tom D'Ambrosi. Tom wanted to be in a band as much as I did, and we got some guys together, and we played in probably the one band that somebody might remember would be a band called Tight Squeeze. And then we kind of outgrew that and certainly weren't really all that excited about the disco era that we happened to be in the middle of.
Yeah.
And basically, Tommy had a cousin named Mike Kelly, who was who is now a journeyman musician all over the area. He plays with everybody. Matter of fact, the list is shorter of the people he's never played with.
Right.
Played with. And so we started talking to him, and he was in a band with a guy named Jerry Yarrow. And we kind of got talking. And of course, Tommy, being the way he wasn't all that, he wasn't all that convinced this would work. But we got together and we started, we were kind of all influenced by the same groups, the band. At the time, Elvis Costello was big, really coming up and really piqued my interest and, that sort of thing. We knew that we didn't want to play top 40 or Chicago style or Blood, Sweat and Tears style horn music. And we kind of always had one eye towards the band, that was right around the same time as The Last Waltz when it came out. Okay. And they had that wonderful section, and they had the influences of Americana and soul music and blues, and you just keep throwing them on, and so that kind of happened. Then we found a drummer that we really liked named Bob Assini, who was playing in a frilly shirt, rayon shirt, as back in the day we called them commercial bands, doing weddings and bowling alleys and that sort of thing. Right. And, he's always wanted the opportunity to bang something really, really hard with his drumsticks, and he became the drummer. Then we met Jeff Roberts, who was a couple of years younger than us. He was a burgeoning at the time, developing as a trombone player. He's now a master/monster player. And as you know, you share the stage with him occasionally. Then we had a couple of bass players and settled on a guy from Waterville, New York named Steve Gilhooly. And we kind of had a band. It started with kind of meager, and we always had an eye towards recording. So we went into the recording studio and did 2 songs. I think we went to the College of St. Rose the first time, which had that recording studio there. And we recorded a kind of almost a ska punk version, if you will, punkish version of Downtown by Petula Clark. One song that Mike Kelly had written, and called City Lights, I think it was called. And we recorded them, and then all proud and happy with the master tape, we brought it down to WQBK, and would you know it, they actually played it. And I mean, you've probably lived through this. I've never had children, but I can only imagine that if seeing your child born is if it's more fun than hearing your first song on the radio, wow, this is a wonderful life. Because that was the coolest thing in the world. And that's all it took. And then we scrimped and saved. And go back to Bob Assini for a minute. He also was the band accountant
Hmm.
So I mean, we pretty much went without pay for 2 years to make our first record, and the money was never very good to start with. So I mean, it took us a while, and then we decided to put out an EP, and
Cool.
yeah, that's
Cool.
the way it happened.
Well, in doing my homework here and listening to the music of the Sharks, there's an interesting combination of 80s rock and roll rhythm section with horns juxtaposed against it in a style that is, it's quite different from, say, the highly syncopated staccato horn rhythms of Tower of Power. So, who did the horn arrangements for the Sharks? And
Well, I'd have to say, early on, when we were doing original music, I would always go over to the home of the songwriter,
uh-huh,
and we sit on the couch basically and hum out parts. I'd transcribe them, and then
uh-huh,
it got to the point where I would do all of it, and then we would go in and like cut and paste and edit in the studio
right.
towards
Okay.
the end. So I was always the primary arranger.
Well, it's good stuff. I like it. I've heard 4 or 5 songs so far. And I know there's an upcoming Sharks reunion gig. Could you tell us a little bit about that? I know I'm the newest hammerhead.
Yeah, this is really interesting. I left in 1990. I was offered a position at RPI. It was a part-time to take over their one jazz ensemble. And I said, I'm tired of getting home at 4 o'clock in the morning or doing a one-nighter in Buffalo or
Yeah.
whatever. I think I'm ready for something. And I was newly married at the time, and like 4 or 5 years. So we were ready for that. And
Yeah.
I don't know. I took the job at RPI, and they went on to play more. They went on as a quintet for a while.
Uh-huh.
The beautiful thing about the band was that there was 3 very skilled songwriters in the band. So
Nice.
continued
Nice.
on.
Excellent. So, well, that brings me actually to the next part of this question. And what is your role and experience as a music director at RPI been about? And what would you say are the implications when an institution of that caliber, and primarily an engineering and science school, have such a robust and popular music program?
Well, it all goes, and it's funny, I think about this day and night, and I've thought about this for 30 years at RPI. And what I've ascertained from this was the fact that if you go back to the students' high school and middle school experience, doesn't matter where they went to school, but their high school or middle school experience, when you start to peel away the layers, you realize that if a kid has a high proclivity for any kind of a technical thing, like whether they're like a super math kid or computers or chemistry or whatever they study on the RPI level, which is it's a top 5 institution
Sure.
in the world. If you go down the hall a little bit, usually in whatever building their high school is in, you're going to notice that they have a really good orchestra and they have a really good band. Some of them, especially on the East Coast and in the Midwest, have ridiculously great marching bands and so on and so on. Now, when you look at one side, you look at the other side, and it's the same brain. And these kids are coveted as wonderful musicians, and they, have decided, probably a good idea, not to try to make your living doing this.
Yeah.
And so we've got that. So they come to me at RPI as, having played for a long time, and they want to continue to play. Now, I might add, RPI has 2 music departments. They have an academic music department where you can get a minor, and I think you might actually be able to get a major in music from RPI, but you don't go there really to study music.
Right.
Oh, and they also have my side, which is referred to loosely as the club side. But where that's the only difference that happens, because the intensity is equal. The
Yeah.
intensity
Yeah.
of the program is equal. And that's where, I'm happy to say that I was allowed to push the limits. And, in its pre-COVID, in its heyday, we had
Yeah.
5 working big bands, and these bands rocked.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
really happy. And they were delineated by style. So if a kid wanted to study Afro-Cuban jazz, we had a whole big band that studied nothing but Dizzy Gillespie and Patato, and we had one that was very closely modeled after the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra.
Right.
And so on and so on. We had one group that was totally devoted to studying early jazz, like Jelly Roll Morton and early Louis Armstrong Hot Five, that sort of thing, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
So to answer your question with a very, very long answer, great high school, great music department, great science, great math, and on the other side, great humanities departments as well.
Well, and that's an optimistic story, and I've had the good fortune to work with some of those students out here in the world of bar bands, and they're always a lot of fun.
Oh yeah,
they're always a lot of fun and great kids.
Seriously, but on the same level, if you think about it, if you're pounding algorithms all day on a paper or a computer, and you have a creative side,
yeah,
you're going to need to let it out, and you're going to need to let that thing roar. So that's pretty much what happens.
Well, that's a good story. I like that. So now you've been involved in many levels of music business, from bar bands to music education to both public school and the college level to high exposure concerts. As we both know, the bar band scene is a tough way for a musician to try and make any money, really. That has never changed since I started in 1969 or so. However, there is a next level up between the bar band venues and the really huge venues like SPAC and Carnegie Hall. What, in your experience, does it take to claw up the ladder to that level? I'm thinking of places like Daryl's Place, Helsinki, Lee Van Helm's studio, Rivers Casino. How do you get to that level? I'm gonna bottle this and sell it when you tell me.
Hall practice. I don't know. I would like to think, or my positive side would like to think that there's with age comes integrity, or the lack of. But I mean, really, literally, if you have enough integrity and you put out the most amount of polished product, then I think, once the whole thing comes together, you would have a chance to do that. But to be really, really honest with you, at least they're starting to recognize this in higher education for those musicians who want to go to like Berkeley School of Music or USC out in California. They really push in the music business curriculum. They push the aspect of networking.
Okay.
Now, you and I kind of grew up with a guy who, as we like to use the air quotes, made it big. His name is Jack Daly. He lives down in Asbury Park, New Jersey.
Yep.
And we've all seen him play with Lenny Kravitz, and I mean, he's had a lot of really, really good. But I mean, what it took for him, the way I understand it, was he basically just went to New York City and started networking. And then 3 or 4 years later, and I don't know what he did for odd jobs when he wasn't able to do this. And another guy, Mike Duclos, who we just lost recently, was this kind of a player. They just basically decided to go do it, I guess. And but the word networking always played into it.
Yeah.
As a Bruce Springsteen fan that I am, I was like, what's the word they use over there in England? Gobsmacked about looking at Saturday Night Live and seeing the E Street Band, the greatest, what I believe to be one of, if not the one of the top 2 rock and roll bands in the world ever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There was Jack Daly replacing the bass player because he didn't want to go to New York City for the COVID problems.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow, man, that's amazing. So that is nothing merely other than the fact that he obviously has all his material and his ability and his art to provide for this band, but yet it came from networking.
Right, right. Well, and I think that's a good answer. There was a day, I mean, I know we're old enough to remember, there was a day when on the lower level of bar bands, there were booking agents. And I don't know, I worked all the time in this area in the early 70s. Never had a, that whole scene kind of disappeared by the time I came back from being in the military. But
all dressed the same, didn't they?
Yeah, it just seems there may be agents for these bigger venues, but I know in some of the situations I've been in, I won't name names of the venues, but trying to get into them is like, it's hard to crack the code.
I think now, and I have a nephew who's wants to do nothing more than be a working full-time musician. It's a lot, too, is about your management. But again, it goes right back to that word networking. I mean, you get yourself a good manager, that's one thing, but yet at the same time, what are you're paying a guy to do your networking,
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, let me go to my next question here, which is, see, now it's been in the news of late, especially. What do you think it takes for singer-songwriters, composers to get a fair compensation for their recorded music that is on sale or streaming services or as a hard copy CD?
Well, I'll tell you what. I never thought I would ever see vinyl return.
No, me either.
Oh, I know lots of 20-somethings who are totally enamored with that little piece of plastic disc. So that said, you have to know, you have to stay like one step ahead of the format that you're going to provide the music in, I guess. And it's very easy for popular culture to say, well, nobody listens to CDs anymore. Well, that's really kind of true, but it's not true. Because people still have CD players. If you're going to sell your product in the club situation, especially where we find you and I, if I had a piece of music to sell, it would probably most likely be still in the form of a CD. But when we're in a similar situation with the band we were talking about earlier with the Sharks, in that we had a little deal with a record company out in Arizona where they've overseen all of our streaming. We remastered all of our records, and it's now available on all the streaming services. But once a year, I have to split up that 9 cents that they send me.
And that's kind of what I was referring to, that 9 cents.
To the other guys, you see, I don't know how
how are we going to change that?
How would I change that? Wow.
Sort of a legislation by government.
Yeah, I almost think that's one for the strategist or the lawyer. I wish, there's a lot of stuff going on that
it's really, it used to be way back in the day, the publisher got 50% and like that. But this, like you say, 9 cents, you ain't kidding. 9 pennies.
And I have some compositions that are available in the written form through the educational, J.W. Pepper Network and that sort of thing.
Sure.
And we sell them occasionally, but I still haven't seen anything from them. So it's almost like they like to say, we're going to steal what we want and let the lawyers figure it out.
Well, okay. Well, that kind of brings me to my last question. This is
Sounds so negative, but
not, well, that's okay. The glass is still more full than empty. We just got to find a way, you know?
might I say, and I think you'll agree with me, no matter what goes down the pike, no matter what the outcome is, we still have that divine opportunity to play our instruments,
Yep.
say something, and to be creative. And you know what? Maybe you can even call it an addiction if you want to, but we do have that opportunity to do something that other people can't do.
Well, yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's, I don't know about you, brother, but that keeps me going. And sometimes I'll take as much as 3 years off. I don't have to, you know, I don't have to feed my family on this.
Right.
I
Right.
put up with a lot of stuff, I guess is what I'm saying.
I completely concur. I very often say the reason we play music is to heal ourselves and to heal other people. You know,
Yeah.
that's the best answer I can ever come up with.
If they're accepting and a conduit for that kind of healing, if you will, then we've done our job.
Yeah, yeah, and blessed. Well, so my last question for today, and that is your latest adventure, BB and the Drive-Bys, which I had the wonderful pleasure of playing
Yeah,
some
man.
music last Friday night with. Could you give us a sense of how that came about and what your plans are for that music in the future?
Well, years ago, I had the distinct privilege of going to an international jazz conference. Now, the operative word is jazz conference,
Mhm.
New Orleans. And we were down there for a week, and
Nice.
everybody was there. I mean, the Marsalis family, and I got a chance to see one of the final Count Basie, really good Count Basie band performances. And I mean, all of these old R&B guys would come in and do shows for weeks on end, and that really stuck with me. But then I had to go back to work, you know. So probably 6 or 7 years ago, I was in one of my moods, up thinking at night, and I'm going, what is the most elemental thing that one can do in this genre? What is the most elemental thing? And I came up with the fact that, you know, being influenced heavily by my, I like to call him my sponsor. His name was Dr. Ade Knowles, and Dr. Knowles was the guy who brought me to RPI, and he saw enough in me that gave me a chance to work there. And from him, learning, and I've known about the clave pattern for years, but the clave pattern is all over the place.
Sure.
And I'm going, that is possibly the most fundamental of all triggering mechanisms for people to enjoy music.
Yeah.
That, you know, well, think about it, that's the, you know, some people call it the Bo Diddley beat. Some people call it Latin jazz. But anyway, so I was fooling around a little bit with Latin jazz, and then I'm going, you know, this could be really accessible if you played it in a bar and started bringing back all of these old bands that were so good, but yet, you know, they're kind of gotten off to the side of the road a little bit.
Sure.
Beaters. And then the Neck Brothers kind of got popular again, which was wonderful. I love that band. It just kind of blossomed. But the real story behind it is that RPI was on break, and my friend at the RPI Cultural Center, which is their version of church, which is a cool version of church, I might add, because it's a synagogue at 1 o'clock, it's a Christian church at 2 o'clock, it's a mosque at 3, it's a Hindu place at 4. You know what I'm saying? All day long, they have services. It depends on what, you know, what kind of religion.
Sure.
Anyway, they also do concerts there. And they said, oh my God, I would love to do a New Orleans dinner concert. So I called up a bunch of guys and I said, you want to play some New Orleans music? And they said, yeah. So I kind of organized it like I organize everything. And that was fine. But it was my mother passing away that actually started this band. Being that before she died, in her last few months, in her lucidity, she said, she kind of knew she was going to go, and she told me that she wanted something big and brassy and triumphal when she went.
Yeah.
That's all you had to say to me. And so, I put some guys together and I started studying the tradition. And not to say that I gave my mother a second line funeral like they would in New Orleans, because it was in March, it was cold, it was snow.
This ain't New Orleans.
New Orleans. But we took the essence of that music and we played a couple of she loved old hymns. So we worked them in a New Orleans style. I called up some friends and it just started blossoming. And then we did Tommy's memorial. And that got a huge response. I mean, that really triggered me. And then started thinking about it for a while, and I'm going, well, I'm going to do this. But at this time, rather than have one set number of guys in the band, we're going to have a core. That's when I met my right-hand man, guitar player, Mark Hawkins.
Ooh, yeah.
And we got talking, and we're gonna, and the running jokes were we're gonna be like Hall and Oates, only not pretty, or Ugly Phil and Don, or and so on, Sam and Dave, and so we got talking about it, and that's how we came to you, Marcus.
Well, I'm glad you did, because I'm having a blast with all of it, and great music, great guys to hang out with, and we had a lot of fun last Friday night.
I'd love to be on a bus with them for about a week.
Yeah, I don't think any of us could stand being on a bus for a week at this age.
I was going to say they'd have to have 7 different second line funerals.
Really. Well, listen, Bob, I really appreciate you helping me out here, making my little retirement project keep going. And
I wish you all the best, because it's a great concept. And the fact that you're honoring through your work local musicians. I mean, we have an amazing amount of resources, and we've some national and international exposure out of Albany, but never, ever of the same level that, like Boston or New York or New Orleans or any of those places. But Albany is unique. I mean,
it is.
That's wonderful players.
I mean, we both are a testament. We've been working this area for, decades. And I'm still surprised sometimes. I'm driving home from a gig and wow, I had all that fun and I got paid to do it. And it's still happening. But so I do appreciate you.
Yeah, the old joke, right? I mean, a musician is a guy with $10,000 worth of equipment in an $8,000 car making $60 a night.
Well, there's some truth to that. Well, thank you for spending some time with me today, and
my pleasure.
We'll look forward to hearing your music on Empire Radio Sounds.
Sounds great. Thank you, Marcus. Have a nice day.
You too.